Portage County Economic Response Team's Economic Recovery Briefing, recorded Wednesday, May 6, 2020.
Welcome, everybody. This is the Portage County Economic Recovery Team briefing. This is briefing number 4, which is hard to believe. So we're hopefully getting better at it with the logistics and everything. We're actually bringing people in from the state offices now, so that's exciting. Today, make sure that as you have questions during the course of the presentations, you want to post those in the chat box, or you can send them directly to Ryan, and some of you may have already done that as well prior to it. Make sure also that you are on mute during the call as well, both on your phone and or your laptop or computer. And next week we already have DWD Secretary Caleb Frostman scheduled to be on our call, and we're also working on getting at least one representative from the medical community to give us some medical updates as well. So we appreciate you doing that. You can take a look at the agenda that Ryan has up on your screen. For those of you that don't, first we're going to have Brian Formella, an attorney from Anderson O'Brien locally. Then we're going to have Wisconsin Secretary of Tourism Sarah Meany and our own Convention and Visitors Bureau Executive Sarah Brish. Following that, we're going to have, and Mike, I'm not going to pronounce your name yet, Mike from Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. Mike is the assistant to the secretary. So with that, Brian, I'm going to turn it over to you. Ryan, I believe, is going to run the slides, and this is Brian Formella, going to talk about employee safety and returning to the workforce. Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Todd. Good afternoon, everybody. Good to be with you. And my name is Brian Formella with the Anderson O'Brien Law Firm. Todd and Ryan, thank you for allowing us to have a few minutes here. I think in the few minutes that I'm allocated, I just kind of wanted to go over a little bit of what is changing and what is staying the same so far as all the legal milieu is out there right now. The first thing I wanted to do is shown on slide 2 here is to kind of give everybody a virtual build-up and kind of a pat on the back. I'm speaking to a room full of virtual experts with each of you. You are all either the owners or managers or significant employees of your respective organizations, whether that's in the private sector or the government sector or the nonprofit sector. And I would just encourage all of us and all of you during this time not to lose sight of your expertise that you bring to the equation, even though we're in a oddball time known as the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm looking at slide 3 then, Ryan. As your organization's experts, you know what it takes to optimize your organization, whether it's in government or private sector. You know better than anybody what is going to increase your productivity and your profitability. If you're in the government sector, you certainly know what you need to do well to deliver efficient goods or services, notwithstanding the time frame that we're in. If you're in the nonprofit sector, you know your mission better than anybody. So even though there's a lot of trees out there that may obscure the forest, I guess I just wanted to start with that overview as to not let anybody or any situation dissuade you or detract from your expertise in that regard. So as a first step in any analysis, whenever I meet with clients, this is slide 4 now. Thank you, Ryan. I think you, even in a COVID-19 environment, as you're thinking about what to do with respect to your employees and how to think about them, given all the new laws or the variations on the laws, is to ask yourself, what is optimal for your organization? Some of that may seem plainly obvious. It would be to get back to work and to open Wisconsin again, and that makes perfect sense as well. But within the hand that we're dealt here at this point in time, my thought is to ask yourselves, what is optimal for my situation, given my relationship to my employees? One of the things when I was thinking with you to prepare for this moment here at this time is that you are, as experts, you need to consider what is optimal for you. I think the idea that we've all had out there over the last month or two is that the alone together concept is valid and it's true. but it doesn't go far enough to allow you all as business managers or owners or executives to optimize what you need to optimize. I'm looking now at slide 5. So in keeping then, ladies and gentlemen, what is optimal at the forefront of your business decisions, we've got this employer-employee relationship that almost always matters in any business or government or nonprofit situation. So with a very brief overview as to what we can do in this limited time, what is changing and what is staying the same? Certain things are, and some things are doing both. The first color portion of the slide, the amber portion there, talks about safety in the workplace. We know that that's taking on renewed or new emphasis, maybe like never before. And yet it's staying the same in a way, because all employers have a responsibility to have a safe workplace in the first instance. So there's some similarity to that prospect. So my suggestion is that we see there's new features to it in terms of maybe what are suggested or guidance for in terms of testing, but it's also somewhat similar to what we, the employers, are otherwise required to accomplish. The gray portion of that slide on slide number 5 talks about privacy issues and when and if you obtain information that you ordinarily may not have obtained in terms of how employees who are returning to this workplace are feeling physically and where they visited. If you're going to be developing a policy to safely check where people have spent their time or their symptomology, some of that is going to be confidential. A lot of it is going to be confidential. So that is the same. And so we, the employers, need to be considerate of those privacy concerns as well. The next portion of that slide speaks to discrimination and accommodation issues. That stays the same. We, the employer, still need to be aware of discrimination, anti-discrimination laws, and accommodation rules in the workplace. I'll speak to that distinction a little bit more in just the next minute or two. Finally, we've got temporary paid leave rights and tax credits, the so-called Family First legislation. We all know that that's very, very new for us, and that almost all of us, if we have fewer than 500 employees, need to manage that law. But that law, that is kind of a tree in the overall forest, I submit to you. So don't get lost in what is optimal for you as you consider the things like the Family First legislation. Finally, on this particular side, there's a consideration for wage and hour laws. A lot of our people in our respective organizations may be working from home. Some of those employees may have exempt status from overtime laws. The so-called salaried exemptions or white-collar exemptions are some of the examples. As we bring people back to work into the workplace setting, as we have them work from home, we employers need to be mindful of possible of mixing of duties, whereas before we may be running leaner than we were before. So we may at least want to be thoughtful of the idea that some individuals may have their status from exempt changed to non-exempt, at least for that period of time that they're doing both exempt and non-exempt duties. That issue doesn't even come up, to be honest with you, however, if somebody isn't working overtime. But sometimes many exempt people do work overtime. So be familiar with that changing of hats that some employees may be having as we organizationally run leaner than maybe we were before. I'm moving on to the next slide then. That's slide 6, and probably almost out of time here. Is that right, Todd? I got to hurry up, I guess, a little bit.
You're doing fine.
All righty. So the next slide just briefly illustrates that the EEOC guidance is out there involving how to interact with our workforce. And that's kind of this tectonic shift as to what we, the employers, can do in terms of inquiring of our employees, whether they're experiencing COVID-19 symptoms. quite honestly, under the Americans with Disabilities Act, the employers would never be able to get away with that kind of line of questioning. But it is now being, as you know, suggested by the CDC and embraced by the EEOC and the state of Wisconsin. So as you continue to consider the safety of your workplaces, just to keep in mind that those questions that we can ask now, as shown on the CDC website or the DHS, the Wisconsin Department of Health Services website about guidance for employers, that may not always be the same. So we're in the special time period of the pandemic that really changes that inquiry that we're allowed to ask as employers a whole lot. Oh, the last part of that slide, I talk about mental illness and fear. There's a lot of fear going on in terms of the workplace. I just want the employers and the managers who are listening in here to be aware that employee fear is both understandable, but not necessarily in the same realm as a protected disability like mental illness may be. And we don't have time to get into those distinctions, but I just want you to understand as you're figuring out what's optimal for you, that trying to manage the fear factor is something that may not be as legally protected as an individual's, an employee's valid and present mental illness, for which there should be accommodations. I'm going to turn the slide here then, please, Ryan, and talk about, the update on the Safer at Home order in the Wisconsin Supreme Court and other matters. Boy, what a legal time period we're in here. As you all know, yesterday the Supreme Court heard oral arguments on the Safer at Home 2 order, I'll call it. That decision could come out really at any time. I think it's a fascinating legal theory that's out there, but we as business owners or managers or executives will be watching closely to see how the Supreme Court handles that challenge. So stay tuned is the best I can offer. And that's Todd and Ryan. Again, thanks to everybody in the audience. That's what I have for us today.
Brian, I'll ask you a question right away off this last slide. Whichever way the Supreme Court decides to follow, whether they have to negotiate a different date or whether the date of May 26th, the court is really not going to make the decision about what is the next step or the work or the back to work order. It will really go back to the governor and or legislature to decide.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the most likely option, Todd. That's the way that the people, the legislature and the briefing has suggested it, is to allow a huddle moment to go on between the legislature and the governor's office.
Okay. And one other quick note to everybody on the call, the slides and the presentation is being recorded and it will be offered out on the city website and also the portageeconrecovery.org website. Another suggestion I heard, Brian, and listening to all different sorts of Zoom calls was related to business, whether it's a small business, maybe everybody, but a bigger business, maybe develop a committee of people that meets regularly to talk about these special issues. And I think communication amongst employees and with the CDC, OSHA, DOL, DHS is going to be really important.
No, I think that's valid, Todd. I probably went over that. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think it actually helps to reduce legal risk for any business or government or nonprofit to set up and try to follow that guidance. So communication is key. I think good intentions have some more latitude in this time frame with respect to the entities that kind of keep watch over the laws. So I think you're absolutely valid. Okay.
Well, Brian, are you able to hang on till the end of the call?
Well, whether I can hang on is always tough for me, Todd, but I'm going to be here. I'm going to stay present with you.
Okay.
Hanging on, right. I hope so.
Okay, well, we'll see if we have some more questions that come down the pike later. Right now, we want to turn it over to the tourism and visitor side of our business. We have Secretary of Tourism, Sarah Meany, but I think Sarah Brish, we'll start with you, I guess. Sarah is Executive Director of the Stevens Point Area Convention and Visitors Bureau. Of course, that sector of the economy has been hit extremely hard. So Sarah, I'll let you start it off, and whether you or Sarah Meany start, I'll kind of leave it up to you.
I can certainly set the pace for Secretary Meany. Thank you all for listening in today. We're certainly in a monumental time in life. As indicated in all of the correspondence that went out before the meeting, this is National Travel and Tourism Week, and while we're not meeting in person like we typically would and celebrate, that doesn't mean we can't celebrate really at a local level. And I just want to bring up a few topics during today's discussion. One, I want to talk really about the economic impact numbers for 2019, but also talk about the current state of the industry, and then where do we go from here. So I'll start out with the good news. The good news is that each year in conjunction with National Travel and Tourism Week, the Wisconsin Department of Tourism releases spending for the previous year. And right here in Portage County, expenditures were up about 2% to $137.5 million. So we're really excited that momentum continues to build. We've had increases over the past several years. We've remained very steady with our increases, meaning we've had as little as 1% and as much as 5% over the past 10 or so years. Since 2012, really, we've had about a 35% increase in travel expenditures. So, that means that people, over the past several years are spending lots and lots of money in our restaurants and in our bars and at our hotels and short-term rentals and in our shops and in recreation throughout the region. So now more than ever, we are realizing the impacts that tourism have on the local economy. And so our community has really learned the importance of visitors traveling in and out of the region. And I want to make note of that, because I truly don't believe that all of our local businesses could survive with local residents alone. And so I'll talk a little bit about some of the lost business as we move forward with this presentation. But this pandemic has really created a very fluid situation. And at first I felt like things are changing by the minute, and just as of late I feel like everything is at a standstill. And so this virus, this pandemic has really impacted our internal operations and marketing efforts, and we've had to change a lot of what we do and how we do things here at the Convention and Visitor Bureau. So like most of you, for 6th straight week, our Visitor Information Center has been closed to the public. All of our full-time staff is working from home. And, they're working incredibly hard. I would have to say we're working harder now than we've ever worked. And that's because our partners in tourism, our local businesses really, really, really need resources. And so our staff has been providing those resources for them in a variety of ways. We've had a number of one-on-one conversations with community businesses. And as soon as the pandemic really started to rear its ugly head in Wisconsin, I have to give kudos to Melissa from my staff, because she created a COVID-19 resource page, and it's really been an awesome resource for our businesses to look at as they try to navigate this very scary time that we're all going through. So, I feel terrible for the small businesses in our community. I would encourage everyone that's on this call to please continue to patronize them as much and often as you can. They're really the backbone for our tourism product here in the Stevens Point area. And we need to make sure that these businesses are open when we're ready to reopen Wisconsin. Because our visitors and our office and our marketing really relies on their success. So I have been, for the past month and a half or almost 2 months, been in contact with Destinations International, which is my parent organization, the Wisconsin Department of Tourism, the United States Travel Association, and Destinations Wisconsin, which is my peer group. And, I've been learning best practice from them over this, last couple of weeks, and we're lobbying hard for, on both the state and the federal level, for increased funding for local small businesses, because we know the pinch that they're in right now. So on top of that, just a few other things that our organization is doing in reaction to the COVID-19 crisis. As many of you know, we're the keeper of the calendar. We've worked with many of the organizations on the phone and the businesses on the phone to promote not only your business, but the events that you have within your structure. And so As the keeper of the calendar, we've had to cancel 187 events. We just went live a couple of weeks ago with a virtual events calendar. We're seeing more and more virtual events pop up, whether it's yoga or story time or concerts and other things. So we're really excited about that, and we continue to promote that on a regular basis. We've also collected and aggregated a ton of information regarding closures and curbside pickups and special deliveries, and that too is being communicated on our COVID-19 resource page at stevenspointarea.com and on our social media as well, our Facebook, our Instagram, and all the others that we're a part of. So Tom in our sales department, our sales manager, has been really busy working with our meeting planners that we've developed deep relationships with. We've had 41 groups cancel that we've serviced alone in March, April, May, and June, and now we're looking at cancellations into July. So those 41 events have created, or would have created, several million dollars worth of economic impact to the community. And so we're just devastated, and we're working again tirelessly to try to rebook those. We're having some folks rebook for later in summer and fall, and moving their events out even a year, 2 or 3 years. So we're trying to keep them local, and we hope to launch a Bring Your Meetings Home campaign in conjunction with the Wisconsin Department of Tourism, and try to entice people to keep their meetings home, whether that's in the Stevens Point area or the state of Wisconsin. So more to come on that. In addition, just wanted to give you sort of, again, that state of the industry overview. Our hotels are experiencing tremendous loss along with all of your businesses. Some are experiencing occupancies as low as 3% and as high as 20%. So we, as someone that receives these room tax dollars generated from our hotels, it's really allowed us, or made us, forced us to tighten our belts and do things differently. We're providing very like inspirational posts, really encouraging folks to plan now, travel later, and really in line with what many other destinations are doing across the state and the nation, for that matter. We've pretty much pulled all of our paid advertising, but we recognize that when the doors open back up, our businesses are going to need us more than ever to market the region. And so we're trying to be very fiscally responsible, and so that we can turn on the paid advertising when possible. We've applied for some grants through the State Department of Tourism and through the EDIL program that'll help hopefully give us some dollars needed for operations and marketing in the future. As we look to reopen doors here in central Wisconsin and throughout Wisconsin and the nation for that matter, we've turned to our peers to look for advice on how we do that. And like Brian had said earlier in the call, we really have to make sure that we're conscious about how we communicate this, not only with our employees, but the folks that are coming in and out of our offices on a regular basis. So on Monday of this last week, the U.S. Travel Association has posted some guidelines for reopening doors, and I would encourage all of you to take a look at those. There's a lot of really good information that we can all implement in our businesses, whether you're a tourism-related business or you're a service, you're an attorney's office, you're a grocery store, it doesn't matter. Across the board, these guidelines will help not only your staff, but make your visitors into your offices feel a little more comfortable knowing that you've put these steps in place. So again, that can be found at the U.S. Travel Association website, or you can go to our COVID-19 resource page, stevenspointarea.com, and you can find that link to the U.S. Travel Association guidelines. So that's about all I have for now. Thank you again, and please patronize our local businesses because they need you more now than ever.
Would you like to introduce the secretary?
Oh, yes. So I have the great privilege, as I mentioned, we have been working hand in hand with the Wisconsin Department of Tourism and our colleagues across the state and the nation. And the department has always been a tremendous resource for us. And was looking at my Facebook feed this morning, and Sarah and I spent the day a year ago, the day together.
Yeah.
Governor Evers was in town. We went to Great Northern Distilling, and we did a big press conference for our community stakeholders and for the media, talking about the tourism numbers, not only here in Stevens Point, but in Wisconsin. And so we do get to see each other on a regular basis, now more than ever via Zoom. And I appreciate all the good work that the department is doing. And much like us, they've really revamped their marketing. We don't want to appear tone deaf to the situation that's going on. And so I think Sarah might talk a little bit about that. But without further ado, Sarah Meany, Secretary Designee for the Wisconsin Department of Tourism.
Thank you, Sarah. And thanks everyone for having me on today. I'm really honored to be able to share an update and also give you a bit of an insight into how the Department of Tourism is spending these days on behalf of the state. So I'll start with one of the categories that Sarah covered as well, but at the state level. As she mentioned, a year ago today, the governor and I were touring the state and telling the exciting story of yet another year of growth in tourism for our state. And the good news that I have for you today is that that story of growth continues. And in fact, 2019 is Wisconsin tourism's largest year on record. And that's something we're very proud of. And it didn't happen by accident, but it also didn't happen in a vacuum. Partners like Sarah and the entire Stevens Point area, as well as our partners all over the state, are the ones doing the hard work to welcome those visitors, to ensure they have a fantastic experience, and assist with that growth. So ultimately, 2019 meant tourism contributed $22.2 billion, with a B, of economic impact to the state of Wisconsin. And I think while I remember doing this a year ago and talking through the numbers from the previous year, I think now more than ever, at the risk of using an overused phrase right now more than ever, many of us now realize the role that travel and travel spending actually has on our entire economy. It isn't just about vacations and getaways. It's actually about the cycle of dollars through our communities, both into jobs and businesses, small and large, but also into our entire community and the many communities around the state. So $22.2 billion in economic impact. And that activity also sustained over 202,000 jobs in the state. When it comes to what that means for tax collection in our state, that's $1.6 billion in state and local taxes as a result of travel spending and tourism impact, which of course contributes to the way our state and communities can be run. And that is exactly what we're feeling the loss of these days. Ultimately, we saw 113.2 million visitors, and that's leisure visitors in the state of Wisconsin as a result of tourism activity and tourism marketing. And this is something I'm really most proud of. One of the things we measure to keep ourselves, frankly, on track is how the investment of tourism promotion turns into a return on investment in tax revenue to the state. And the past 9 years, we've seen an average of $1 to every $6.4 in tax revenue. So that's $1 spent promoting tourism to $6.4 coming back in the form of tax revenue to the state. In 2019, we actually achieved an 8-to-1 return, which is growth over last year and growth over the 9-year trend, which I think is an important thing to keep in mind when we think about how we need to tighten our belts moving forward and what recovery really looks like. When we spend $1 promoting tourism, we see $8 in tax revenue back. We are obviously the state tourism industry is a very important revenue center to our entire state. So that's something I think that we all can really celebrate. Now, this wouldn't be a great presentation unless it was some sort of a bad news sandwich. So that's the good news. Here's the middle part of the sandwich, or the center of the Oreo. Without question, as Sarah already has mentioned, and everyone on the call today is aware of, COVID-19 is smacking tourism in the face. It is hitting every business and every person in ways we probably wouldn't have anticipated, and definitely didn't a year ago. In fact, United States Travel Association has made some really important projections based on actual travel spending losses year over year, but also projections on what we should plan to be losing in order to plan for recovery. So, for example, in the last 7 weeks alone, the state of Wisconsin has seen a loss in travel spending compared to last year of $1.3 billion in travel spending in 7 weeks. And it's not even our high season yet. So that translates into dollars not spent in businesses in every community, dollars not spent on employment, dollars not spent in restaurants, in hotels. This is a hole that is becoming so deep, it's going to be really hard to get ourselves back out of. But without question, the way we need to plan is to continue to invest in how to bring those dollars back to our community when it is safe to do so. And that's exactly what we've been working on at the department. For example, Sarah Brish mentioned the peer group for Convention and Visitors Bureaus called Destinations Wisconsin. A survey that was conducted by Destinations Wisconsin projects that the state of Wisconsin is anticipating at least a loss of $13 million in room tax revenue not being able to be spent in operations and promotion across the state through CVBs. Now, what that really translates into is the very entities that communities rely on to bring people back to the community don't have the dollars to promote the community. And that strikes home for us at the Department of Tourism. And as a result, what we've been trying to do is shake every tree possible to figure out how do we best support not just the businesses, because the businesses, of course, make up every single community, but also how do we support those CVBs and chambers of commerce who are largely 501c6s. Now, 501c6 organizations had a lot fewer options available to them through the federal stimulus package. In fact, 501c6s were left out of the Paycheck Protection Program eligibility. Their available, dollars available were significantly limited to 501c6s. So this is an important piece of the equation when we think about what the recovery is going to need to look like. So some of the things we did at the department level with the intention of pulling whatever levers we have include kind of two levers. One is our grant program. Our grant program exists by statute, and that funding is also dictated by statute. We have one remaining grant round available in the fiscal year, which ends at the end of June. And we worked in an important way to lift a few administrative rules in order to make that grant round available to as many appropriate GEM grant applications as possible. Sarah indicated an example of how Stevens Point and the Central Wisconsin Tourism Association, did I get that right, Sarah? I think CWTA, I think is the correct name of the group, is working together collaboratively as a region to go after some of those GEM dollars to build awareness for people to come back to that region. Now, keep in mind, Sarah is working off of fewer dollars than she would have had in the previous year, but the grant round itself added a bit of flexibility to that in order to make those dollars available to those organizations that need it most. The other lever that we have, other than grant dollars, is of course marketing dollars. The department has dollars available in its budget to market the entire state. One of the ways we've reallocated or reprioritized how those dollars would be spent when it's time to promote marketing, time to promote travel again, when it's safe to do so, is through an expanded match co-op program. So what that means is, we've had cooperative marketing programs in the past, but what we've actually done is expanded that program specifically because of the circumstances we are in order to take, for every dollar put in by either a combination of regional or local nonprofits to promote their region, we then match those dollars with department dollars at either 1-to-1, 1 to 2.5, or 1 to 1.5 of Wisconsin Department of Tourism dollars to make those dollars go twice or 1.5 times further, right? So that has taken a lot of lifting. We need to kind of change how we think about how do you conduct a marketing program? Where do you place the media? How much are you spending in each channel? That's been a really important heavy lift, and that meant a really significant pivot in a very short period of time. You know, Sarah was saying it's like it changed every day, and frankly, it feels like things have changed every hour almost as circumstances continue to evolve. But really what we're working to do is figure out how do we leverage the existing resources and seek additional resources wherever possible in order to support our partners and stakeholders throughout the state. That also includes the individual businesses. And I know Mike Wojciechowski from WEDC will be talking about that as well. But we are working very closely with WEDC in putting together both reopening plans for the industry verticals, but also in determining some of the best ways for available dollars to be translated into tourism business owners. So I think those are some important things to keep in mind. Now, you know, Sarah also alluded to making sure we're not tone deaf. You know, there's nothing scarier as a marketer when you're in a circumstance like this than turning on the hose and somehow inadvertently offending the very people you're trying to attract. People are very sensitive, and understandably so. Travel right now is exactly what people wish they could do, but know that until it's safe, they shouldn't be doing. There are two pieces to this. One is, how do we ensure that we as a state have put in the right guidances and guidelines for businesses and workers to feel safe? But also, how do we bring back consumer confidence that we as a destination and our communities around the state have done those things that will keep individuals and their families safe and healthy? It isn't just about opening doors back up. Of course, we need to open doors back up as soon as we can. But if we open doors back up and people don't feel safe, we're not going to have people coming into those businesses spending their dollars. So we need to do both of those things in parallel, and having strong guidance and measured response in conjunction with promoting the safety and accessibility of Wisconsin as a place to spend your dollars need to happen in tandem. And that's exactly what we're doing. So in the short term, right now would not actually traditionally be a very active advertising time for the Department of Tourism. We would be very much in preparation mode for getting ready to launch the summer campaign. Summer, winter, and fall are the very active promotional times for the department. The summer campaign would have begun probably a week or two ago, depending on the year, or a week or two from now, depending on the year and depending on the dollars available. But in the last 7 or 8 weeks, what we've actually been doing is pivoting our efforts to appropriately spend dollars to keep people thinking about Wisconsin as a destination they would love to visit when it is safe to visit. So we all know we've been stuck at home, spending more time in the same four walls and with the same faces in our families for a long time. People have needed hope, they've needed an escape, they've needed distractions. And actually the mission of the Department of Tourism for the state of Wisconsin is to inspire visitors to experience Wisconsin. What that doesn't say is exactly how. We've been able to pivot a lot of our existing resources into ways for people to virtually experience Wisconsin through things like virtual tours or online classes. We have an entire gallery of things like that gathered on travelwisconsin.com. But aside from that, it also means now is the time when they're planning for when they can travel again. People on average spend 4 months to 6 months in advance of traveling, starting to plan their trips. So now, and the time we've been spending at home, is a really pivotal time for us to be relevant and present in the minds of people who will find Wisconsin to be a safe and accessible place to come. So there's a lot of data out there at the national level. In fact, one of our partners, Longwoods International, who also gets involved in helping us understand the economic impact of tourism, has done a survey on consumer travel sentiment. And that tells us a lot about if and how consumers are changing their travel plans based on COVID-19. Of course, the answer is yes, they have. But the rate at which they have changed and the rate at which it has leveled out actually gives us some reason for hope. First of all, about half of people who had intended to travel in the next 6 to 12 months actually said they've completely canceled their plans. It's about half. But of the people who still continue to plan to travel in the next 6 months, many of them actually say that they've shifted a flight trip to a drive trip. That's really good news for us in Wisconsin, frankly. Our target audience markets have largely been regional drive markets for a long time. That means we still remain a viable destination for many of the people we've been advertising to for quite a few years, including some additional regions where Wisconsin may be even more attractive as a destination than maybe it otherwise would have been. Now, pair that with the fact that one of the main drivers that people come to Wisconsin to enjoy is outdoor recreation. In fact, that has been a leading motivator for people to visit Wisconsin and a leading driver of spend in Wisconsin. And again, in the current circumstances, when people do start traveling again, their confidence level can be even greater in Wisconsin, knowing that we have abundant outdoor recreation, many wide open spaces, and a lot of smaller towns and communities who end up being the gateway to that outdoor recreation. Wisconsin is very well poised to be able to rebound quite effectively, and even more possibly than some of our competitive states, as soon as it is safe to travel. In fact, I'm excited to share that in the last 2 days, both Wall Street Journal and Washington Post pointed out Wisconsin for its approach to this interim positioning, but also its viability as a destination in a time of post-COVID-19 travel, when what you're seeking is safe, accessible, affordable, but also a wide variety of activities. So while I walk around telling the COVID sandwich story of great news, not so great news, and really optimistic news, I think that's what I'd like to leave you with, is sharing with you that the data tells us that Wisconsin can and should have some optimism for the return of tourism in a good, strong way. We do have to balance that, though, with the importance of bringing consumer confidence back along with the reopening of businesses. We need to make sure that we, as communities around the state, are consistently following appropriate guidelines so that workers, business owners, and visitors and customers themselves can feel equally comfortable that their time in Wisconsin means safe and healthy days following their visit here. So that's my COVID sandwich story. But one of the things that I will leave you with is to demonstrate an example of how significantly we've changed our marketing activity. Many of you may remember 2019's summer advertising campaign. There may have been a famous person in the middle of a parade in a very crowded street at a festival. Well, guess what we're not going to have as many of in 2020? We're not going to have as many parades. We're not going to have as many festivals, and we're not going to have the same types of crowd activities and events as we have. In fact, our research prior to COVID-19 with consumers and potential expansion markets told us that what they want from Wisconsin and what they're seeking in a vacation is actually opportunities to get away to places that are less about crowd and more about scenery, unique experiences, interpersonal time together, and outdoor recreation. So you're going to see that shift very clearly happen when we start turning on the promotional campaign when it's safe to do so. And you're going to see that consistently play out through our regional partnerships, such as what Sarah and the collaboration in Central Wisconsin is working toward. So what we're working to do is make sure these things are very well coordinated, that they're strategic, that they're not tone deaf, and that they're really impactful to bring dollars back into our communities. And I thank you for your time.
Great, thanks so much, Sarah, and our Sarah as well. It's tourism, as we said, is a tough industry, but we appreciate all that you guys are doing. We're going to make a quick switch to Mike. Mike's with the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. Mike, we've got a slide presentation coming up from Ryan. Again, the slides and the presentation itself will be recorded. So, Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everybody, for your work and having me. Without folks like you guys on the ground putting together a task force like this, the point where we get to reopening wouldn't be possible. Also, I'd like to thank Stacy Johnson, who's our WDC regional economic developer in the area, who's has been on the ground doing the Lord's work, dealing with businesses day in and day out. But I'm sure all of you have seen and heard the governor put out his Badger Bounceback plan. This is a plan that is geared to listen to science, geared to listen to the healthcare industry as we look towards reopening. as Sarah's hit on and everybody's hit on, one of the keys to this entire reopening is going to be consumer confidence. We can't go through this and we can't do consumer confidence without an individual walking into whether it's a restaurant or a store, and the proper protections in place. Where WDC is kind of playing in kind of to help the reopening is that we're putting together the Be Ready plan. The point of this plan is to make sure that we have programs in place and guidelines in place. And these guidelines we're working with the Department of Health Services on, as well as the industries, and as well as, for example, Secretary Meany and Department of Tourism on, to make sure that there are guidelines in place to help our businesses reopen. On top of that, a Restart 72 plan, which will help get money to businesses that they can use in order to reopen. For example, Stevens Point Brewery will probably need to buy face masks for people who come in and want to do a tour. Where do we have that funding, and how can we move that and make sure we get into the hands of businesses so they can reopen? It's going to be huge and essential as we're going through this process. Additionally, we also just launched earlier this week Focus Forward, which is going to be our digital platform of where we're going to be keeping these guidelines. Hopefully they are going to be coming out later this week, which is really exciting. This platform will also have digital videos for restaurants that will be able to kind of see how they're setting up a kitchen in order to make sure that the employees are protected, how they're setting up the actual dining area to make sure that customers are protected. And as part of this, we all are going to have to get the word out and make sure that everybody's taking part in this. So I'm going to shoot over the Focus Forward link into the group chat for everybody to take a look. We are also working with the Department of Administration to see where we can use CARES Act dollars in order to get those to businesses as well to help during the reopening process. That's it for now, and if you have any questions, let me know.
Mike, we all have a crystal ball, right?
Exactly, and it's never changing. Everything's been the same since the beginning, and it will be good.
Do you have any sense from the WDC standpoint in terms of businesses, the change, any sort of a change? I know we have the Supreme Court issue going on, which is a factor in that, which is yet another unknown. But do you have a general sense of optimism or reality?
I think we all have to have a sense of optimism through this, right? But what I'll say is the Department of Health Services is doing an amazing job tracking all of the data. We have to, according to the Badger Bounceback plan, have to hit certain gating criteria, medical criteria, including testing, contact tracers, PPE available, and stuff like that. They, on their website, have of course, a red light, a gray light, and a green light on where we are currently at with that gating criteria. I believe, and this is as we move through to the different phases. So I believe 2 of the gating criteria are hit as of right now, and I think 2 or 3, there's not enough data or are not hit. So hopefully, as we are all going through this, I don't have a sense of when that time will be, but all of us doing our part, such as staying safer at home, such as wearing masks out, are going to help move that time up.
Sure. Let me put you on the hot seat again. Not really. What might be your suggestion or WDC's suggestion for a couple things to really start planning now for when their businesses are able to reopen and get past curbside and start opening up? We'll still have to obviously follow safe distancing and a lot of those things, but as businesses start opening up, what thoughts or recommendations or ideas, with just a couple maybe, would you give to folks on the call?
So, I mean, the first recommendation, which you said, is, of course, the obvious one, which is going to be go to our website, and this is going to be the Focus Forward I'll send out to everybody, and check out the guidelines that we've put together, depending on your industry. That is going to be a huge part of this, as we've all recognized and said. It's making sure consumers are confident coming into your business, whether there's maybe a sticker somewhere that says, we're focused forward business, recognizing that you're treating both the employees and the consumers in a strong way. I'd also keep an eye out on what programs may be available through, not just the SBA and PPP. That's kind of a little bit past that point with the CARES Act, but trying to see as we get funding and stuff off the ground here at WEDC, what's available there. And I mean, you can't plan for what you don't know, but it's a crazy time. So any good business practice in the sense of cash flow is going to be hugely important, I think. And hopefully there's no second spike, but you want to make sure you're prepared for anything.
Well, that's true. Yes, you do have to be mentally prepared for the possibility of a spike again and what that might entail. We have to be ready, as we've tried to be, for anything. I know a couple things we've just done with the Business Council is we've ordered masks because we do a lot of public, obviously, networking events and education events, both in our facility and elsewhere. So we've purchased a significant number of masks, so we'll have those available for people. We also just had our furnace checkup done. We decided to replace all of our filters, even though they were only a few months old, just as a safety precaution. We're having some special cleaning done, but there's all sorts of things that we've talked about like that. And as you said, and all the folks who presented have said, there's a lot of great resources out there, whether it's the CDC, the OSHA, Department of Labor, Department of Health and Human Services, WEDC. There's a lot of great resources out there. We try to put as many of those as we can on the portageeconrecovery.org site. So take advantage of that. And Mike did post on the chat box. For those of you on the phone, that site is WED as in dog, C.org, WEDC.org/focus-forward. So there's some more resources on there. So, kind of getting back to Brian's call at the very beginning is, get people together in your organization, get together on their first day, look at all these resources, try to figure out what's best. So whatever level of open means, we can do that, and we're prepared to do that.
Exactly.
Mike, any last thoughts or comments?
My only last thought and comment would be, this is, and everyone will say uncharted or unprecedented, right? None of us have gone through this before, a global pandemic. It's crazy times, and we recognize how much everybody's hurting during this, but we're all in this together, and we're going to get out of it together. And I think that's going to be a key as we move through here. And I just can't extend our gratitude enough for you guys fighting on the front lines and kind of helping businesses and doing the real work. So we appreciate everything.
Well, thanks to you. And it's a team effort, whether it's local or county or city or state, federal, we're all working on this together. Ryan, I am going to, one other thing, Mike, I'm sorry. Could you please pronounce your last name for me?
Yeah, of course, Wojciechowski.
Wojciechowski, great. Thank you. We love those names up here in central Wisconsin. Thank you very much. That probably was inappropriate to say, and I'm going to get fired. But anyway, Ryan, let's turn it back to you. I know we had one question come through, and Ryan's pulling up a map, it looks like. How about that? But Ryan, if you want to
believe it or not, yeah. So thanks, Todd. Thanks, Brian, the Sarahs, and Mike for taking time this afternoon to talk with our group, and we really appreciate it. So I've been having a lot of fun lately making some maps, and the map that's in front of you is it's called a heat map, and essentially what we did was we took the city's COVID-19 grant applications, the operating addresses of those businesses, and we put it on a map to kind of identify where there's the biggest need moving forward with assistance to respond to the COVID, and if there's any economic policies that we can make going forward based on the data. And I just there were a couple things on here that really stuck out to me. This yellow blob right in the center of the map, that's our downtown, kind of the core of our local businesses. And so to me, as an economic developer, I've got some real concern that in our downtown, where we've got hyper local businesses, that they're struggling right now. And it's going to kind of ease into answering some of the questions that we received earlier. But there's downtown over here on the right-hand side of the screen. That is closer to the industrial park. You can see we did have some businesses over there that were requesting it. The Church Street corridor, we had a few businesses as well. And then we also had a few businesses down in the village of Plover apply for the grant. Obviously, it was originally designed for just City of Stevens Point businesses, but I think it's an important map to for folks to see and to start really visualizing where the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic is starting to occur. And as we move forward, again, we're going to be using this kind of data to make some policy decisions at the city level, and I would encourage the county to, and the villages as well, to take along and start making some really area-specific economic policies to help our businesses through these times. So this kind of eases us into one of the main questions that we got, which was, all right, Portage County recovery team, everyone else, a lot of other counties are starting to push a little bit on some reopening plans, and the economic response team yesterday met, and we started to have these discussions. Is what does an economic, or what does an opening plan look like? And so what we came up with was we're going to start meeting, and we're going to kind of get all the major stakeholders in on these conversations. Most importantly, the hospitals, our medical providers, so that we know if we, through virtue of the state Supreme Court's decision making, for example, saying that, hey, you can start reopening on a regional basis, that Portage County is ready to start reopening, and with a plan that's based deep in our science and our medical and our business communities. And we have a collective buy-in in order to present and start reopening the Portage County economy, if you will. So, we're hoping to have folks from the medical and hospital communities, from our local business communities, from Portage County Health and Human Services, and from the Portage County Business Council, the city, the village, and so that when we move forward, that we have a collective response, and that everybody is on board with the reopening plan. And that what's really would be nice about it is if we could have it where we can expand it, and if we start seeing other issues, that we can retract it, and that everybody's on the same page. And that might be a pie in the sky idea, but there has to be a way for us to move forward. There's a real concern from the city and the county side that, you've seen all the reports that 30, 35, 40% of our local businesses may not survive another month of safer at home. And so we are trying to create a plan that's going to work collectively to just start reopening the Portage County economy if and when we are able to. So again, here's the map on there. I think it paints a pretty stark situation that we're trying to address moving forward. And I'm more than happy to answer any other questions, but I do know that was the main one that we received from folks when putting this presentation together.
And Ryan, I don't see any others in the chat box. I think the one element just to add, right now we're still under the governor's executive order through May 26th of safer at home and following those rules. And but again, we don't know what the Supreme Court ruling may change. We don't know what the governor may decide as a next step with the legislature. We know they've been talking together, so obviously we have to follow those. But as Ryan said, as a committee, we're trying to think ahead, and if we are given some flexibility, so to speak, we want to make sure we're ready and able to let our businesses open, again, whatever the state allows and permits.
Perfect. That's all we had, Todd. We do have another call scheduled for next week, Wednesday. Department of Workforce Development Secretary Caleb Frostman will be on that and will be presenting to this group. So with that, I believe that's all we have, Todd.
Sounds great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to our presenters, Brian, Sarah, Mike, and we'll see you all in a week, if not before.